Just say, it's all we have from Brandon. Okay.
Hey, I'm not the one who...
I'm saying Brandon was the one that made it, so I'm giving you credit.
Okay, I see how it is.
It's awesome.
Okay.
I'm creative,
You
what
not
can I
have
say?
one? No, it's
I don't have one. Super creative. You want a blank piece of paper?
So, we'll just start because we made it through verse 4 last week. So we'll just start reading there and just chat about a couple things before we get into verse 5 and beyond. A great and wondrous sign appeared in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. Who's the woman with 12 stars and the clothes with the sun with the moon under her feet?
Mother Mary.
Israel.
Mother Mary, that's right. Actually, it's Mary Baker Eddy, like we talked about last week, remember?
Israel.
It's Israel. Israel. Remember that. Very important to remember that, okay? She's pregnant. She's crying out in pain. Who is Israel pregnant with?
Jesus.
Jesus. Okay? Remember, Jesus, he came as a Jew. He came for the people of Israel, and then the people of Israel were supposed to reach the world. Remember, God using Israel to reach the world. That was the design from the very beginning, since Genesis chapter 12 with Abraham. Then another sign appeared in heaven. An enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his heads. Who's the red dragon?
Satan.
Satan.
Ton.
The devil. Yes, and we talked about the crowns. What do crowns represent?
Depends.
Power.
diapers.
Depends on the
Victory
crown.
or
Yes, that's
power?
correct.
Diadem,
Diadem.
Stephanus.
Diadem or Stephanus. So in one case it's victory, in other case it's just power. It's ruling. Okay.
Said it was the Stephanus crown. Power.
Right.
Not victory.
Stephanus
Yes.
is power.
No, Stephanus is victory.
Stephanus is victory.
Yeah,
Okay.
Stephanus is victory.
But we're saying this one is
Power.
the other one.
Power.
This is the Stephanus, right?
The victory crown.
I believe this is the victory one.
That's what I have in my notes.
The Stephanus.
Authority/victory.
Yes, authority/victory. Regardless, it's a sign of power. It's a sign of whether it's victory over war. I mean, the devil was clearly, represented by a very powerful beast. Dragons throughout Scripture are always viewed negatively. They're always viewed as these powerful beasts that are...
Diadem.
Oh, it is diadem in this one?
Diadem.
That's what mine
Okay.
says. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, so his little note, the badge of a sovereign. So it's power, it's authority.
So it's the diadem crown. Not
The diadem, that's
Crown
correct.
of power, not victory.
Okay.
Yep, power. Yeah. His tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. What?
Angels. Third of the angels.
Yeah, we figure this is probably a reference to the devil taking out a third of the angels, now a third of the stars. So then, like we talked even on Sunday, how many is a third?
A lot.
More than we can count.
At least one.
Yeah, at least one. At least 1 out of 3. We really don't know, but we estimate that there's probably a lot of them. A lot of them. Okay? And what we know that even though he took a minority of them, a third is a pretty significant minority.
Yeah.
So how special do you got to be to convince a third of the angels to leave God to follow you?
Yeah.
He's not special. He's just crafty.
I mean, people follow crappy leaders all the time.
Yeah. We talked about that, didn't we? His tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that he might devour her child the moment it was born. What's this a reference to?
Herod.
Probably the most visible reference would be when the devil used Herod to put basically a death threat.
Everybody 2 and under.
Any baby that's 2 and under, you got to kill him. And sure enough, Jesus was able to be it. Mary and Joseph were able to escape, went down to Egypt. It was interesting. There was one of the things I wrote down was it was called. One of the authors talked about the conflict of the ages.
Genesis 3:15.
Yeah, well, it goes all the way back. And so listing this, and he went through and kind of outlined. He said, the devil wants to thwart the coming of the Redeemer. Period. So if Genesis 3:15 said one basically is going to come from you, who's going to strike your head, and you're going to crush his, or he's going to crush your head, you're going to strike his heel. And so that's Genesis 3:15. But think about the murder of Abel by Cain. Very next chapter. Trying to take out the line. Number 2 chapters later, what did the sons of God, who were probably the
Nephilim?
fallen angels, the Nephilim, yeah. What did they try to do? They tried to pollute the whole human race. That was Genesis chapter 6. Also, then he went, cut off the Hebrew nation in Egypt, Exodus chapter 1 and 2. Try to take them out there. And then also the decree of Haman. You guys remember Haman?
Ah, yes.
Yes, the decree of Haman in the book of Esther, where Esther was told about this decree, and that's when Mordecai comes and says, who knows, but maybe you were put into a place for such a time as this. Because if Haman would have followed through, his goal was to kill every Jew in the entire
Nation.
nation.
World.
That's correct.
Kind of thing.
So you see this conflict played out where the devil tries to work with people, interject himself to take out the Jews, to take out the Jewish race from which, or the Jewish people through which the Messiah would come. So anyway, okay, so the dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that he might devour her the child the moment it was born. Well, she gave birth to a son, a male child, who will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. What is this talking about?
What's the significance of the iron? Is it the metal type of ruling, I'm assuming?
Yeah,
Reminds me of the vision of the king and Daniel with the different parts of the body being different.
yes,
Things.
and the bottom portion was iron, and it was a reference to the power of the Roman Empire. So iron is typically it's a very hard metal, and so iron is very reminiscent of kind of force. So what this means is, so why the scepter? Who has a scepter?
The king.
The king. So what would an iron scepter signify then?
Harsh
Ruthless.
ruling.
Strong.
Strong. Basically a king by force. Okay? So think about it like this. She gave birth to a son, and who's the son? Jesus. Who will rule all the what?
Nations.
The nations with an iron scepter. Has that happened?
Not yet. Not in
Yeah, really, it has.
Where?
all the nations? I
Well,
don't think so.
you've got all the nations that came into power, and they were ruled, but they were all destroyed because of this person with the iron scepter.
Where has he ruled the nations with an iron scepter? Where has that happened?
Some people would say
In
it was
his-
the war of 1948.
Oh, when
Some
the
would
Jews,
say that.
yeah.
When the
would say
Jews, well,
When the Jews were able to take their land. But how did the Jews get their land?
by force.
By the niceness because of the Holocaust.
Yeah,
Because we
basically
felt
by a
bad for
treaty
them.
that was signed. Yeah, they were
Yeah.
given their land. They didn't overtake the world and take their land. This was a treaty that was basically written to give them the promised land, to give them the nation of Israel. So,
Then why are they having so much trouble there now?
well,
Spiritual warfare.
yeah, the reason why is because within this treaty,
Ishmael.
the Palestinians were allowed to still be there.
They unhappy.
And
Ishmael.
so you have this fight between the descendants of Ishmael and the descendants of Isaac.
Don't they realize
Fight
that
will
they're
go
distant
on until
relations?
Jesus returns.
That doesn't matter now?
Doesn't matter.
And
They're
So
wild
they
donkeys.
disagree on who the child
Yeah.
of promise
That's
was.
correct.
Uh-huh.
That's correct.
So
Because Ishmael-
they know they're related. They will concede that, but they disagree on who that promise passed from after Abraham. So they would say Ishmael was the child of promise, not Isaac. That's why this conflict is there. They go. If you want to go all the way back to the root, that's where it started.
Because isn't he a wild donkey of a man?
Uh-huh.
Am I thinking the right one?
Ishmael.
That's
Yeah.
Esau.
And he was
Or
always
that was
gonna be
Esau.
against-
That was Esau. That's correct.
Oh,
That was Jacob and Esau.
Okay.
wasn't he
Yeah.
always going to be against his brothers or a difficulty or
That
a
was
thorn
Esau.
in their side or something?
Yeah, that was
like
Esau.
Because
Yeah.
they switched the.
But the conflict was prophesied about between the descendants of Ishmael and the descendants of
Yeah.
Isaac, because Ishmael was the firstborn.
Okay.
But Ishmael was not born of the promise.
By the living.
He was born of the human fix. You know, Hagar was Sarah's maidservant, and so Sarah says, "Hey, maybe if you get her pregnant, let's make her your wife, and that way when she gets pregnant, has a child, then that's maybe the promise." And God was like,
Hello.
like this. Exactly. And so Hagar gets pregnant, has Ishmael. God's like, no, that wasn't my,
Poor Hagar.
that's not me. So now Abraham's got a real problem because he has a firstborn.
But
And-
because he was Abraham's son, God still chose to bless.
That's correct. That's correct.
Which happens in Genesis 21. But God said to be, I'll just start in verse 8. And the child grew and was weaned, and this was after Isaac's birth, and Abraham made a great feast on the day that Isaac was weaned. But Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, laughing. So she said to Abraham, "Cast out the slave woman with her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac." And the thing was very displeasing to Abraham on account of his son. But God said to Abraham, "Be not displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to do, do as she tells you. For through Isaac shall your offspring be named. And I will make a nation of the son of the slave woman also, because he is your offspring." So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water, gave it to Hagar, putting it on her shoulder along with the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. And then toward the end there it talks about Ishmael growing up in verse 20. And God was with the boy, and he grew up. He lived in the wilderness and became an expert with the bow. He lived in the wilderness of, is it Paran or Paran? I always forgot how you say that one. Paran?
Paran, I think it is.
Paran. And his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt.
So yes, so the conflict goes all the way
back.
Yeah.
Because he ended up being
That's correct.
expert with the bow and arrow.
But it was
Well,
still
he
promised.
thinks that he's the heir.
Yeah.
And it's
yeah.
He wants
it's
to be there.
interesting here that I almost think that being mentioned, the expert with a bow, oftentimes the bow would be seen as the weapon of the enemy. So when we talk about like God flooding the earth and hanging his bow, it's not necessarily just the idea of rainbow, it's God hanging up his weapon, that he was an adversary against mankind in that moment. So God's hanging up his bow. It's kind of like their euphemism for the enemy. It was always
Yeah.
the bow.
So when will Jesus rule with an iron scepter?
Millennial kingdom.
So turn in your Bibles to Isaiah chapter 9.
Always the Old Testament.
That's my favorite testament.
You like it?
I do. I just want to make you squirm.
9, you said?
Yes, Isaiah 9, verse 6. verses 6 and 7. For to us a child is born. To us a son is given. What does that make you think of?
Christmas.
Christmas.
It's always Christmas time.
For
Peanuts.
unto us a child is
Is
born.
born.
Unto us a son is given. Yeah, there we go. That's the one.
It's too young.
And then it says, and for to us a child is born, to us a son is given. And the government will be on his shoulders. Has that been fulfilled yet?
Not yet.
No. And he will be.
But he's ruling now.
Have you seen him on? Have you? Seen
I have
him?
not seen him,
I'm
but I
telling you.
know he's there.
He is there, and that's what we see by faith. But this is what I'm saying, Sally. When you take the Bible from a literal perspective, it opens your eyes in a way that you don't see when everything is metaphorical. Is Jesus sitting at the right hand of the Father?
Yes.
Absolutely. Is he ruling today?
Yes.
Yes. Is
But
he?
the devil is ruling on earth.
Well, but
Yeah.
that's the thing.
He's
There-
ruling from
he
the
is-
spirit, the unseen realm.
Yeah, exactly.
We still live in the
He
sea.
is over everything. But has the devil been finally subdued yet?
No.
In fact, we're going to see in our passage today, this conflict of the ages really heats up. And so when you accept things literally, and this is what we're going to talk about in a little bit, we're going to see this even in Zechariah when we go to Zechariah. We'll see how the nations are going to be ruled. Okay? And they're going to be ruled by a king. The king is Jesus himself. He will establish his kingdom. He will set up his throne. He will rule and he will reign from Jerusalem. When you see that in the Bible and you accept that literally, then you don't have to spiritualize all the other places. Yes, is he ruling today? He is. But we know that by faith. But when I look around, do I see evidence of his ruling today? No. Heck no. So I accept by faith that
That's good.
in the spiritual realm, he is ruling. But he is allowing the things to still happen on this earth. His plans, his prophecies, they will come to pass. But for now, he is not ruling and reigning from the earth. When it says the government will be on his shoulders, I don't think that has to be the spiritual government. Because I'll show you another passage. But if we go to this, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace, there will be no end. He will reign where?
On David's
On David's throne. Where's David's throne?
Jerusalem.
It's in Israel. It's in Jerusalem. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. In other words, God is more than able to make this happen. So if you look over in Zechariah chapter 14, I know we've been here many times before, but it's such a great passage to show what the future will hold. Zechariah 14. So, when we read in verses 1 through 8, it is a reference to the tribulation period. The day of the Lord is coming when your plunder will be divided among you. I will gather all the nations to Jerusalem to fight against it. The city will be captured, houses ransacked, women raped. Half the city will go into exile, but the rest of the people will not be taken from the city. Then the Lord will go out to fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. Has that happened yet? No, no way. On that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem. Where does that take you back to? The Ascension. The Ascension. Acts chapter 1, where Jesus is there. He's standing there talking to his disciples, and all of a sudden he's gone. And the disciples are like, what just happened? And the angel says to him, why are you standing here? He said he was going to leave, and he's going to come back just the way he left. So, where was he standing when he left? On the Mount of Olives. Here it says, he will return on that day, on the day of the Lord. He will return and stand on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem. Mount of Olives will be split in two. It goes through there. On that day, verse 8, living water will flow out from Jerusalem, half to the eastern sea and half to the western sea in summer and in winter. It's going to heal the land. Verse 9. Here we go, Sally. The Lord will be king over the whole earth. On that day there will be one Lord, and his name the only name. Is there a time when we have had Jesus be the king over the whole earth?
No.
Where there's only been one name? When you read it literally, this can't have happened yet. And so when we see in our passage where it says, you know, she give birth to a son, he will rule all the nations with an iron scepter. That is the sign of a king, and the sign of a king with power. Notice what it says. The whole land from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, will become like the Arabah, but Jerusalem will be raised up and remain in its place. Verse 12, this is the plague with which the Lord will strike all the nations that fought against Jerusalem. Oh, meek, mild baby Jesus, right? Meek, mild baby Jesus. If you don't go up to Jerusalem to worship, guess what happens?
Smite.
What it says.
Flesh will rot.
You go.
Dissolve while they stand on their feet. Wow.
Yeah.
Will rot in their
Wow.
sockets.
Okay.
Tongues will rot.
Jump down to verse 16. Then the survivors from all the nations that have attacked Jerusalem will go up year after year to worship the King, the Lord Almighty, and to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. Why the Feast of Tabernacles? Because Jesus is dwelling with them. That's what the Feast of Tabernacles pointed to. He is dwelling with you. That was tabernacle. He is tabernacling with you. If any of the peoples of the earth do not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, he's going to say, oh, that's okay. I'm so nice. What does it say? If they don't go up to worship the King, the Lord Almighty, they will have no rain. Does that sound like meek, mild baby Jesus? That's what I'm saying. When you read the Bible and you say, okay, what does an iron scepter mean? It means that it's no more Mr. Nice Guy. So we have this picture in our brain of Jesus always being gracious, kind, and he is. But during this time, he is going to be the king. He will have the scepter, and it will be a scepter of iron, because there will be consequences if you don't do what he says.
Is the whole rest of chapter 14 about the millennial kingdom?
It is. The whole rest of it about the millennial kingdom. So we get little snippets about what this kingdom will be like, but we see that there will be Gentile nations. They will be allowed to still be around, but those Gentile nations who don't go to worship, because remember, there's only one Lord, and his name is the only name. There is one king on the earth. And everybody else who thinks, you know what, I'm not going to go worship that guy. Well, you can. You don't have to, but guess what? You're not getting rain the next year. So many people, and this is the thing, if when you talk to people outside of what I would say literalists, like churches like us, they tend to take eschatology and say, I don't understand it. So eschatology looks like this. At the end of this time, Jesus is going to come back, he's going to make it all right, and then we're going to have the new heavens and the new earth.
Which is focusing on 4 verses at the end of this book.
Yeah. Jesus is going to come back, he's going to win the battle, this cosmic battle, he's going to win it and make it okay, and then everything is done. And so eschatology, rather than being this very complex, multi-layered, 1,000+ year time, becomes condensed into Jesus is going to return and make it all right and everything will be fine. But there's so much scripture that talks about a time yet to come that we then have to spiritualize and say, oh, that was when Antiochus Epiphanes came into Jerusalem back in whatever. That's what that prophecy is about. Or, back in Daniel. Or it's when Titus came into Rome in AD 70 and wiped everything out. But when you read the Bible literally, you're like, no way did all that happen. There's still so much left to go. Does that make sense? Questions?
Sounds like
A clarification question. Are you saying that, would you say Daniel had double fulfillment or only,
Double.
Good, okay.
Yeah.
So you would say Antiochus the 4th Epiphanes still was relevant at that time for that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. What were you going to say?
Well, Sunday's message talking about warfare and the enemy, he just kind of like tweaks the truth a little, so it sounds good. So why would somebody? It sounds like I'd rather believe what you just said, as opposed to taking it literally and yeah.
Is I don't know, this may not be irrelevant, but is there anything that, how long people will live in that time? Like, I know lifespans back, in the hundreds of years old. Are the lifespans of people going to be longer in that period of time? Is there
Yes,
anything
yes. There is a verse, there's a verse, and it's 100 years. The person who dies after 100 years will be thought of having died when he was a baby. So that's there.
Wow.
Yeah. So there is this seemingly long life. Now the question is that long life worldwide, or is it
just
in the land of Israel? Because when you read the text, it says, "On my holy mountain." Okay? It says, "On my holy." In other words, it seems like when the millennial kingdom happens, God is going to, and we read about this river that's going to flow out from Jerusalem, that it's going to almost make the land of Israel this supernatural, unbelievable place. It says the reaper is going to follow the sower. In other words, they stick the crops in the ground. Next thing you know, you're reaping it.
The new Garden of Eden.
Yeah, almost like a new Garden of Eden. It says, "On my holy mountain, the child is going to play with the adder."
What?
Most parents wouldn't let their kid go out and just play with snakes, much less poisonous adders. And yet it says the child is going to go play with the adder. The wolf, the lion is going to lay down with the lamb. You've heard those things. But it always comes back to "on my holy mountain." So I don't know if this is going to be worldwide or if it's going to be limited to just Israel. But what we see is that the land of Israel is going to be truly what Jesus even talked about in the Gospels. The city on the hill, the light of the world. That the nations are going to come to Israel because they're going to say, that's where God is.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a pretty cool time. So once again, if we go back to Revelation, I guess I'm pretty convinced, I guess you'd say, pretty convinced that the Son is Jesus, and he will one day rule with an iron scepter. And her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. All right, think back to Acts chapter 1. Acts chapter 1. Describe for me what happened there.
Is that Pentecost?
Jesus went up to heaven in Acts chapter 1.
Jesus goes up to heaven. How does he do it?
On the top of the mountain.
Ascending.
He ascends on the clouds, doesn't he?
I don't know. I'm asking you. That's what I'm asking. I'm asking, what describe for me? So Jesus is meeting with his disciples. Acts chapter 1. He's meeting with his disciples, and they're like, "So, this kingdom you've been talking about? Are you going to do it now?
Can you kill the Romans now?"
Exactly. Okay, we missed the whole crucifixion thing. Bummer on us. But, okay, now that we did all that, now are you going to set up your kingdom? I mean, that's kind of the picture that he's getting at. Like, we're ready for it. And he's like, well, the times and the dates, not for you to know. Only the Father knows that stuff. But, wait here, Spirit's coming. And then what happens?
Bye.
This ends.
And then Jesus is like, my chariot awaits. Time to go, right?
While they watched, he
There's
was
the cloud.
taken up,
But notice,
and a cloud received
Notice,
him.
it says, while they watched, does it say he's like, see you guys, I'm
No.
going to fly away?
No.
Taken up before.
He was taken up,
A cloud hid him.
i.e., it not of his own power.
He was snatched up.
He was snatched up. He was taken up. See, in my brain, whenever I read Acts 1, it was always, he's just talking to him. Next thing you know, he's like, okay, guys, I got to go. They give the old Midwest goodbye. I said hi, hello, or goodbye 4 times.
He was mid-sentence.
Yeah.
So, I told you.
But that's the picture, what we get here in Revelation 12. It says, and her child was snatched up. In other words, God took him out. The child was snatched up, and that's what Acts 1 tells us. After he said this, He was taken up before their very eyes, and a cloud hid him from their sight. God removed Jesus. So if we go back, and her child was snatched up to God and to his throne. Why? Why to his throne?
So that the Spirit may come.
So that he could sit.
At the right hand of
He sat down at the right hand of the Father. His job was done. The work of redemption had been complete. He paid for the sins. He gave his life. The work of redemption was done. It says he sat down at the right hand of the Father. Okay, now we're back to the woman. And who's the woman again?
Israel.
Israel. The woman fled into the desert to a place prepared for her by God where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. Okay, we got some details to talk about here.
How many
time and time and half time.
years is that?
4 years.
3.5,
Okay.
I think.
So, let's talk about the days, 1,260 days. How long is that?
Less than
1,260
42 months.
3.5 years.
3.45 years.
Yeah, 3.5 years. 3.5 years.
How many leap years?
Depends. I don't think I had that back then.
3.5 years.
This is in the future.
Also known as 42 months. Also known as time, times, and half a time. And we're going to read that in verse 14. The woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle so that she might fly to the place prepared for her in the desert where she would be taken care of for a time, times, and half a time.
Oh, I see.
So when you see time, times, and half a time, that's 1 plus 2 plus half. So that's 3.5. You've got 1,260 days, which is 3.5 years. Sometimes it'll be listed as 42 months. So it's always the same thing. And this is what, if I go back to the illustration that we did, remember, we have the tribulation.
That's like a fancy flannel graph.
Okay? What starts the tribulation period?
When the two
Rapture.
Removal of the
Removal
church.
of something.
The church is raptured and the
What starts the tribulation period?
Antichrist.
Antichrist.
The signing of the peace treaty. Okay, the signing of the peace treaty, and that's in Daniel 9. Signing of the peace treaty.
But it's all right.
Daniel 9, okay? Signing of the peace treaty. Daniel talks about the time, times, and half a times. He talks about, this is, by the way, Daniel 9, 24 to 27. What is the end of the tribulation period?
Christ returns.
Christ returns, second coming. Okay? And so, why do we, what's the 3.5 times? What's the 1,260 days? What are we talking about here?
was 7 years and it was cut half.
So it's a 7-year tribulation, exactly as.
Worse and worse, even bad and even badder.
So,
Worse and worse.
this, I say this,
Even
the
better.
first 3.5 years are bad, and the second 3.5 years are worse. Okay? Now, we're going to show, well, we'll see this in some other passages there. But this is 3.5 years. And this is 3.5 years.
So 7 years.
What is it that divvies up the tribulation period? What's the middle?
The
Armageddon.
ruining the
Armageddon
Breaking
is
the-
here, second coming.
The
Breaking
breaking
the
of the
treaty.
peace treaty.
Breaking of the peace treaty, which is also
Israel.
the abomination of
Desecration.
desolation, which this is Matthew 24. Matthew 24.
Did we read that last night? We did.
Did you read Matthew 24?
We skipped Matthew
No, we
24 and
skipped
then
it.
we went back to it.
So this is the 7-year tribulation. The 7 years, 3.5 years, and 3.5 years. And here we have this. Now I want you to have this illustration in mind because this is going to factor into our study for tonight. Okay? So Revelation 12 gave us the history that led us up to this. We're going to see in Revelation 12, the body of Christ, the dispensation of grace, never even mentioned. Doesn't even factor in. All it's concerned about, Revelation is very concerned with what is God doing with Israel to make it right. That's what Revelation is concerned about. Okay? So, we've got the signing of the peace treaty, which is what starts the tribulation, the abomination of desolation when the Antichrist kind of fesses up and it comes out. His true colors are shown.
Sucker.
His true colors are shown, and the second coming. Now, there is so much good stuff to talk about, and we are never going to get through Revelation 12 tonight. I'm just telling you.
I was like,
So what?
No,
I love this stuff. I'm telling you.
we can tell.
Can you tell?
I couldn't care less.
Okay.
I really don't care.
All right.
just happy to be
So, if we go back to Revelation,
John likes to think he has
I
voice.
do.
Don't worry, when I do 13, it'll be 1 week.
Okay.
No, it won't. No, it won't. It better not be.
I'll try hard.
We'll stop you.
The woman fled into the desert. So, where's the desert?
Outside of Jerusalem?
Is the desert what is meant by the desert?
No rain.
Let's put on our best covenant theology hats, and what can you come up with that might the desert mean?
Outside of Eden.
the wilderness wandering.
Gentiles.
Sand.
Outside of Jesus.
Did you say Gentiles, Jennifer?
Yes, yes.
Uh-huh. That is the interpretation that a lot of our covenant theology brethren would like to use, that this is a reference to Gentiles. Okay? Some say it's metaphorical for the Gentile nations that will protect the Jews that scatter. Now, where might I go in the Bible to corroborate that image? In the New Testament, turn to Matthew 25. Go to Matthew 25. You ever heard of the sheep and the goats?
Yes.
If there's sheep, you know. Just memorize every reference to sheep.
Tis better to be a sheep than a goat. Have you seen that from
When the Son of Man comes in his glory,
What verse?
Matthew
31.
25:31, sorry. 25:31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. Which, by the way, when is this? Second coming.
Millennial kingdom.
Remember, when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered. What does that sound like?
Everybody's coming to Jerusalem.
Sounds like millennial kingdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like Jesus has an iron scepter, right? All the nations will come, they will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous, and who are the righteous? The nations that took care of the Jews, right? Then the righteous will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink?" You're like, "I don't remember even seeing you before." When did this happen? When did we see a stranger or invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." When you took care of my people during the tribulation, you were taking care of me. That's the interpretation of Matthew 25. Now, granted, we can make application for modern day. You know, when we took care of the down and out, when we took care of the stranger, when we took care of the widow and the fatherless or something. It was like we were taking care of Jesus. So we can make application, but the interpretation, it specifically says here, when the Son of Man comes in his glory, which is when? The second coming. Second coming. And then he goes on. Then he will say to those on his left, bad, bad, bad. If you're left-handed, you're going to be judged. I'm just telling you.
Thanks.
Then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, you didn't invite me in. I needed clothes, you didn't clothe me. I was sick and in prison, you did not look after me. Then we will say, well, when did we do that? And he said, I tell you the truth, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. So the nations that didn't take care of Israel during the tribulation, they will be judged. You got a question, Beth?
No, not anymore.
Did
You
he
just
answer?
answered it, yeah.
I just answered? Okay. So this is a reference to the tribulation period that is yet to come. That thing right there. But God basically is saying, I'm watching. And yes, I'm giving you a very long leash, devil, Antichrist, all that stuff. But the day of the Lord, meaning the day when the Lord shows he's all in control. The day of the Lord is coming. And when he comes, he will make it right. And it's not going to be, oh, I know you tried hard. No, it's going to be an iron scepter. Okay?
So it's no longer claiming of belief in Jesus Christ, and it's works at that point and helping his people during the tribulation. Is that what you're saying?
There's still faith involved, though.
Okay.
There's still faith involved. Faith says, I cared for you because I believed there was something. In other words, God was not done with you.
Okay.
So I cared for you. So it's not necessarily that I gave you a piece of bread. Well, okay, because you gave them bread. But it was faith that led you to give the bread.
Okay.
So it's demonstrated faith.
Demonstrated faith, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Some would make that argument. That's
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
demonstrated. Like, I can believe this chair will hold me up, but do I actually believe it unless I sit in the chair?
Yeah. If I have faith, I will sit in the chair.
You could make the argument that that's been universal, like that's universal, saved by grace through faith.
Yeah. So, that's one interpretation. This is the Gentiles. What's another interpretation? What about that they actually go into the desert? Is there any desert or wilderness anywhere near Israel?
Egypt.
Okay. I'm telling you, this is so cool. Turn to Daniel 11. I'm like,
Got so
ooh,
wide.
this is
You're scaring me.
this is fun. I'm telling you, this is so much fun.
11.
Daniel 11.
So this is another possibility of the answer to the desert
Of where, of
question.
what the desert is, where the desert is.
I think I can tell which one he likes more.
This one.
11 verse.
Daniel 11 and verse 36.
You were way off.
All right, everybody there? Okay. The king will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god and will say unheard of things against the God of gods. Who might this be?
Antichrist.
The Antichrist. Okay? We're talking about the Antichrist here. He will be successful until the time of wrath is completed. What does that sound like?
Tribulation.
He's going to be successful until the tribulation period, the time of God's wrath, is completed. He will be successful until the time of wrath is completed, for what has been determined must take place, i.e., God has plans and he is working them out. He will show no regard for the gods of his fathers or for the one desired by women, nor will he regard any god, but will exalt himself above them all. We could talk a lot about that, but we're going to keep going. Verse 38, instead of them, he will honor a god of fortresses, a god unknown to his fathers. He will honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. He will attack the mightiest fortresses with the help of a foreign god and will greatly honor those who acknowledge him. Who might this foreign god be?
The other horseman?
The devil. Where does the Antichrist power come from?
Satan.
It's in other words, it's not necessarily a god that is like, let's say, Ra or Baal or Molech or whatever, some of the known gods like this. But the beast, the Antichrist, will be empowered by the devil himself. And then it says he will attack the mightiest fortresses with the help of a foreign god, will greatly honor those who acknowledge him. If you're on his team, you go up. If you're not, you're going down. He will make them rulers over many people and will distribute the land at a price. At the time of the end, this is interesting. At the time of the end, the king of the south will engage him in battle, and the king of the north will storm out against him with chariots and cavalry and a great fleet of ships. He will invade many countries and sweep through them like a flood. He will also invade the beautiful land. What's the beautiful land? Land of Israel. He will also invade the beautiful land. Many countries will fall. But Edom, Moab, and the leaders of Ammon will be delivered from his hand. He will extend his power over many countries. Egypt will not escape. He will gain controls of the treasures of gold and the silver and all the riches of Egypt with the Libyans and Nubians in submission. These were world powers. But reports from the east and the north will alarm him, and he will set out in a great rage to destroy and annihilate many. Does this guy sound powerful?
Yeah. Sounds like Napoleon.
He will pitch his royal tents between the seas of the beautiful holy mountain, yet he will come to his end and no one will help him. Okay? So, this beast has unbelievable power. Even though other powers will come against him, he's going to just annihilate them. And yet, somehow, he can't beat Edom, Moab, and Ammon. Now, where are Edom, Moab, and Ammon?
My map is at home in my...
Well, isn't it a good thing that I brought a map then?
We're going to break that out.
His three-dimensional map.
That's right. So, where is the Holy Land?
I can't see that.
I don't.
Left of the...
Here's the Holy Land, okay? Now, it extends a little bit over here, but the Promised Land is typically from this area up, the Sea of Galilee's here, so kind of the north here all the way down to Beersheba is down here, okay? So this is really kind of the land of Israel. So where is Moab, Ammon, and
The
Edom?
right.
In there.
Edom is down here. Ammon is right here.
Moab's the...
And Moab is right in the middle. Moab right there. So, has anybody ever been over to Israel and maybe seen or at least know what this looks like over here?
Desert.
You have.
I'm sure you'll tell us about
It is nothing but...
Desert.
Does it sound strange to you that the beast can take this country out? That the beast can take out Egypt, the Libyans, the Nubians?
That's where Doom comes from.
That he's going to go and annihilate any other nations out there, but he can't beat Edom, Moab, and Ammon?
It's because
Yeah,
of
but
Ruth.
they live in the desert and the other are in good land. The Ammonites, the Moabites, and them have learned to adjust to the desert.
Oh, it's gonna be like.
And those in the good land haven't adjusted to the
I just
desert.
said that to him, and he's like, no.
Do you know that Egypt is a lot of desert?
It's actually about Islam.
Did you know that Libya is a lot of desert? I cannot tell with certainty, but it does sound a little strange that the Antichrist can't seem to beat these little people groups. I mean, the Edomites, the Moabites, the Ammonites. David had no problem with these when he was taking out all the other nations. No problems with them.
Where did Dan, wasn't he on the other side of the river from everybody else?
Dan
Yeah.
was up north.
So that was further north than
Way
where
north,
those
yep.
are? Okay.
Yep, the tribe of Dan was way up in the north.
Okay. I didn't know if it was like part of
Just
the, because there were
reading
two or
that.
three tribes that did not go across.
Yeah,
the
way up
river.
north.
Yeah. Do you have a speculation on why you can't take that land, or it's just something that
I don't have a speculation other than
he probably already owns it?
no, I don't think so. I think it's because God, that's where he sent the nation of Israel.
to the
And
desert.
God is protecting them.
It sounds like God's carved out a place
That was
there
my
that
guess.
you're not touching this place.
That's correct.
I don't care how powerful you are, what your weaponry is, you're not going there.
Yeah. Because if we go back to Revelation,
They're used to the desert. I mean, they've been there for a long time anyway, right?
the woman fled into the desert to a place prepared for her by God where she might be taken care of for 1,260 days. Turning your Bibles to Matthew 24.
Matt.
You're trying to trick us.
24.
We all turn back to Revelation.
I know.
More quickly.
Well, I read the verse again, but I wanted you to go to Matthew 24.
Verse what?
15.
You say 15?
Yeah, I believe it's 15. Yes. Yep. Well, you know what? Actually, go back to verse 3. It's because I want to set the table here with the 4 minutes we have left here.
Proud of you.
If we go back to this, as Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives,
That's 3.
Matthew 24:3. Yep. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? They're really concerned about this, aren't they? They're like, man, we're ready for this whole thing to be done. We're sick of these Romans. We're sick of all these people.
We can relate.
Yeah, exactly. Jesus answered, watch out that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, claiming I am the Christ, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. I want you to, best as you can, think about what we have studied already in Revelation. Has there been any talk of earthquakes?
Earthquakes.
Yeah.
Earthquakes.
Earthquakes, yes.
Has there been any talk of famine?
Yeah.
Yes.
How about wars?
Yeah.
Nations against nation. Have we talked about any of this?
Yeah.
So we can see, and when is all this stuff happening?
Tribulation.
First 3.5 years.
years.
Where is the breaking point between the first 3.5 years and the second 3.5 years? We'll see it here in just a second. Then, verse 9. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. Remember, he signs a peace treaty even with Israel. Like, I'm your buddy, I'm your friend, you're going to like me. And then this whole story changes. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other, and many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but he who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Verse 15. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, that's the middle, okay? When you see that, he says, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains.
Oh, yeah.
Where are the mountains?
Off to the
To the east. Flee to the mountains, which is to the east.
Just like David.
Let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the roof of his house go down to take anything out of the house. Get out. Let no one in the field go back to get his cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for a pregnant woman and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again. If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened.
Wow.
So it won't be a full 7 years then.
That's the question. That's what a lot of people think. I tend to think the same thing.
Pat.
What would
You think same thing?
I can't hear. What did you say?
He says then it probably won't be a full 7 years. Yeah. Will it be cut short by
Those days are short.
3 days?
Already.
By 28 days? I mean, we're not told, but
3.5 years.
it just seems to be that this is going to be so bad during this second 3.5 years.
A day, days.
Verse 26. So if anyone tells you, there he is out in the desert, do not go out. Or here he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather. So I like this. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky. The heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. Picture like the bat symbol. And all the nations of the earth will mourn. They will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But what we just read, Matthew 24, the early parts of it, 3 through 14, Matthew 24, 3 through 14. Verse 15 was the abomination desolation. And then, as you also then see over here, really it's Matthew 24, 16 through...
Oh. It sounds like it's coming from the sanctuary.
You hear the
Is that
buzzing?
the...
That may be Ed's hearing.
Here it is. Oh, okay.
Sorry. You're hearing this thing?
There we go.
We didn't know if there was a fire alarm going off somewhere in the building.
Let it burn.
I didn't know if it was my tinnitus.
Well, we had the inspector come
It
today.
is.
He told me it would be
It's
fine.
my tonight.
No, just let it burn. I mean, don't call
So
him.
there we go. Does that make sense?
I can't read that.
Matthew 24, 16 to 24. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm showing you this because as we keep going in Revelation, we're going to need to see this, okay? Because it answers a lot of the questions as we unpack some of these other verses in here.
So you saying Matthew 16 through 24 is the second coming or the second half?
Second half of the tribulation, and then when you get, I guess I could also add there the second coming. Yeah, I wrote it in the wrong place. You're right. Let me change that. So this is Matthew 24. This is Matthew 24, 16 to 24. And then this one right here is 24, 29 to 31.
You take that photo.
That's what it is. Does that? Any questions on this? So when it says he flees out into the desert, you know, the woman goes out in the desert for 1,260 days. I believe that is a reference to the second half of the tribulation. The abomination that causes desolation happens, and then what happens? And we're going to see here about, in verse 14, the woman was given 2 wings. In other words, she flees quickly. She goes out into the desert, to the mountains, which sounds to me like Edom, Moab, and Ammon.
Well, if you look at the terrain of your map, you can see there's
Exactly. Yeah, this you can see where the mountains are. It's over here. Now granted, they're up here on this mountain. This is Jerusalem right here. But they will go down and then up to the mountains. They're fleeing out in the wilderness. Like I said, I had never seen that section in Daniel 11. But when I was like, wow, that is fascinating. So I think we can very much take it literally. Yes, Jim?
What's the Sabbath thing? Why is it so bad if they're leaving on the Sabbath?
Oh, I'm wondering that too.
Well, I mean, I understand pregnant women and all of that jazz, because that's pretty awful, but why is it so bad if you're leaving on the Sabbath? Because...
Do you think I had one in mind?
I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to kind of do
I mean, if
some-
you're already at rest, you're...
This is
I mean, imagine
fresh in my
chilling
mind.
at home in your PJs.
Did you say something there?
Xbox.
Yeah, because if it's
And then having to
Sabbath
run out
and people are
at that
supposed
moment.
to be at home,
Yeah.
it's gonna be
That'd
very
be their day
obvious
of
if
rest.
the whole tribe.
Are they going back to the
Yeah.
Sabbath of the Old
Yeah,
Testament?
yeah.
Because they're Israelites. They're not the Gentiles.
Well,
running
it's
out,
saying
right?
like on the Sabbath you're not supposed to do a bunch of work, and then all of a sudden you got to run for your life. That's not very Sabbath.
You're not ready.
Yeah.
And like the guilt within inside
Yeah,
of
but
you
you're
too,
not
if
ready,
you're
it doesn't
very
matter.
obedient.
You're still not ready if you're out in the field. Don't even go
Okay,
back get your clothes.
Would you rather have the apocalypse start while you're already in your car driving home from work, or when it's your day off? I think that's the question.
I I
No, I
just,
don't
rather
know
have it
when I'm
while
going to
either
work.
way, it's,
On my way to
I
work.
would rather be in my car, but
Well, it also mentions the winter when like there's not plentiful food around. The trees aren't budding. There's no fruit on the trees. You're relying on stores. You can't go out and gather anything right at the time. So it's gonna be difficult. And so
See you, Mike.
if it's during the winter, you're gonna even have a rougher time than or if it's in the summer.
Yeah, yeah.
which I understand that, but it's saying don't even go into your house and grab anything. So you're gonna be going out with whatever you have on your back anyway.
Out into the desert for 3.5 years.
So it's not gonna, to me, I don't understand because
All right,
maybe
who's
you
closing
have
prayer?
a couple more layers of clothing on.
Don't think like a Westerner.
It's a
Just-
Jewish culture thing, basically.
I'm not worried about it.
All right.
I want to be with him anyway.
That's right.
I know, but still, it's a wonder. It's a wonder.
That's right.
I wonder
Yeah.
the same thing, Jim.
All right, Seth, you want to close with prayer for us? Okay.
Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you that we can just come together and meet and fellowship and just study and learn about your word. And I just pray that we'll retain all the information, even though it's a lot, and that we'll just take it to heart and learn something from it. I pray that we all have a safe trip home and have good nights. Amen.
Amen.